feeling pretty decent right now about the recruiting haul that they brought in, but certainly need to address a couple more spots, corner being one. Like to see them bring in a corner. Hopefully Amarian Fortenberry of South Alabama can be that guy that they close down. And then I'll feel decent about the cornerback room. Obviously, we'll talk about it again, another wide receiver. And then offensive tackle, I think, is where they probably really need to hit hard, because we know that they probably would like, ideally, 2 offensive tackles. And the pickings are getting a little slim right now, and they haven't landed one.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. John Kurtz, Derek Young, Cole Manbeck with you. This is a football transfer portal edition of the show because K-State's got, I believe it's 8 commits in the portal now. We've got to talk about a lot of guys, and they have, so DY, it lists 7. But aren't they, it lists 7 on the site that I was looking at, but aren't they, which is not yours, I'm sorry, but aren't they missing one? Aren't they missing one who was not in the database because he played at like a D2?
That's hateful. They've looked at my site. And 2, I think I'll be honest, I think the 8th is actually Ralph Ortiz, but he actually hasn't announced yet.
Okay. All right.
Well, the linebacker from West Florida. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, that is it. Yes, West Florida. It's confusing because I was like, okay, it's the West Georgia kid, and then I was looking that up, and I'm like, no, that's Marcavius Moss. Like, what? Okay, West Florida, West Georgia, whatever, man, the portal's crazy. Anyway, that's why we're here for all of you that are wondering about this. Sit down, pull up a drink, of course, Spin Holiday bottled in bond bourbon, I'm sure, or 360 vodka from our good friends at Holiday Distillery. Make sure you get stocked up on that. A lot of basketball coming up. We are through the holidays, but it's a new year, new you. So if you have not indulged yet in Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon, might I suggest a New Year's resolution to drink more. Thank you to our great sponsors at Holiday Distillery. Okay, first things first. It is January 2nd as we record this. Happy New Year, everybody. And as we sit here, that means that we have made it past 5 days post K-State season ending, which means that the transfer portal is closed for now for everybody on the roster until the spring window. So that is a good thing. All the chatter about, hey, Dylan Edwards and Jace Brown, whatever that rogue Twitter account was that tweeted before the Iowa State game that Jace Brown was entering the portal, swing and a miss. They did a really good job with retention on this roster. Like, was there, maybe this is an unfair or somewhat mean way to phrase it, but was there a loss that you really felt like hurt in this first portal window?
Hurt? Probably not. I will put it this way. I don't think that anyone left that they put up a tremendous fight for when it came down to it. The ones you could debate a little bit, because I think at least at one point they all had a chance to return had they wanted to, that being Trey Spivey, Carver Willis, and Keegan Johnson. I think those 3. Keegan Johnson probably could have came back at any time. Obviously, he elected to move on probably for a larger role. I appreciate him and what he did. He had a better year this year, but injuries still didn't completely disappear. It probably made sense to part ways, but I think if he wanted to return, Kansas State would have gladly allowed him to return, to be quite honest. I think Trey Spivey at one point could have probably came back, and then things probably got a little bit messier towards the end, and I don't think that was a possibility. So he enters the portal. I think he signed with Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Keegan Johnson landed at New Mexico, by the way.
Carver Willis, similar situation, I think, to Trey Spivey, where I think at one point, actually probably a little bit different in the fact that I think the 2 sides agreed on a return. Things got a little messy there. And then I think both sides were okay with parting ways at that point, and he ends up at Washington, which was probably a bit of a surprise because some of the rumblings before he had entered the portal suggested maybe a different school. So anyways, he ends up at Washington. But again, like you said, not too much hurt, not too much pain, not really losing anyone you absolutely tried to fight for tooth and nail, which is, I think, unlike probably about 90 to 95% of schools. So that's an impressive feat by Kansas State. What I will say is this. You see all that retention of pretty good players. that takes money too. Like so you got to remember, you got to spend your money to keep, but you got to spend your money to get. So part of your financial allocation was to keep your guys rather than to go out and go get 25 or 30.
Well, I would just say that that's pretty good job. Money well spent. Like, I think you want to build like that, right? Like, look what's happening to the basketball program and how much we're talking about, retention's important, and it can't be just going and buying a new roster. And you're looking at Kansas right now. Yeah, I mean, if you go look at redacted website and look at the transfer portal class rankings, Kansas is higher up the list, but that's because they have like 150 they have to fill like an entire roster this year. I mean, that's not happening with K-State. And you like a lot of the young playmakers, and you like what you saw from a lot of them in the bowl game. So I think this is very good. And it's one of those things. I know, again, patreon.com/3mod Discord gets annoyed with me sometimes, but it's one of the strengths, I think, of this staff, and you got to give them credit for that, keeping a lot of those guys in an era where it's tough to do that. Now, they'll have to go through spring and do it too. So, I mean, it's not like you're totally out of the woods, but that's a pretty damn good job, and that is an important part of program building.
Yeah, you mentioned Jace, Dylan. I would even add on the defensive ends like Toby Osunsami, Chidi Obi's, or I think even Zayshawn Rich. I don't think he ever thought about leaving him, but boy, I think he had a pretty good price tag on him at some point by other schools that wanted him in the portal.
Yeah, the retention was outstanding. I mean, the emotional pull, I think, if you look at a guy that maybe hurt initially within the fan base, was probably Trey Spivey, just because he was an up-and-comer, a redshirt freshman, a highly touted recruit in his recruiting class, a big physical wide receiver, and he came on at the end of the season, right? So I think some of the fans were a little more tied and drawn to him, and unfortunately, he decided to enter the portal, but he's a guy that, like, you bring in Jerron Tibbs, and I think he's a comparable guy. Similar age, bigger bodied wide receiver, Purdue wide receiver transfer that was a sophomore, 6'3", 215 pounds, and 300 plus yards receiving this last year as a younger player at Purdue, which was an awful team. Can he make a jump at Kansas State? So I think they replaced Spivey adequately, and they'll be okay. Other than that, I mean, nobody really hurts. I mean, Andrew Langang was better than Carver Willis was at any point this season in the bowl game, I thought. Like, Carver Willis wasn't very good this year at right tackle, and K-State didn't put up a heck of a lot of a fight there to keep Carver Willis. So not much that hurt. Jace Brown back, which is huge, obviously, set the sophomore receiving record with 823 receiving yards in program history. And so I think you got a lot of pieces to build with. And DY, you mentioned Toby Osunsami. I think he's going to be a star next year. And he just flashed so much. I thought he changed the tenor of the bowl game with his ability to get pressure. He made a big TFL getting into the backfield, and now he's going to have that second full year at the end working there after this offseason.
Yeah, I'm with you. Toby was definitely on that list of guys that at one point, you were really wondering about, will you be able to actually keep him around? Now, they have also done some nice work within the class that they have pulled in, which, 7/perhaps 8 at this point that are going to come to K-State. I would say at the top of my list, probably I'm doing a quick scan here to make sure I'm accurate in this. I think the guy that I'm most excited about because of the upside that we've seen when he's healthy is Gunnar Maldonado, a safety from Arizona who battled through some injuries this year, but in 2023 when Arizona was a 10-win team and slapped around Oklahoma in the bowl game, Gunnar Maldonado was a really, really good all-conference safety. So that should help a ton. You've got Amos Talele, a USC offensive lineman that is committed, which I think is very, very helpful, that you definitely needed. Area of need. Gabe Powers, Ohio State linebacker. I mean, to me, I guess I would say those are the headliners. DY, correct me if I'm wrong, but anybody else that you would add to the marquee there at the top of the list here?
Just maybe add some context a little bit of context on those three as well. Gunnar Maldonado, as you said, I think he's all Big 12 caliber at safety for Kansas State as long as he is healthy. And word that I've received is that that's the one they kind of really, really got pumped for when it happened, when they got the news. So that tells me that they are probably not concerned about the injury. At least that's what I'm going to infer. And if that is true, I think he is at the top of what you're bringing in. And I think I'll just add this. I've called Marquez. I don't know that they're going to what positions they're going to play. It seems like maybe they're still trying to figure that out in terms of the safety and how they arrange it. But I think Markevius Moss is Kobe Savage 2.0, and I've had some in the building kind of have similar thoughts to me, or at least reached out in agreement. So you add those two with VJ Payne, and I think you've completely upgraded the safety by a wide safety spot from this past season by a wide margin. Gabe Powers probably goes to the will linebacker spot. He was in line to get a lot of playing time this year, and after the first few games, they went a different route. So I'll be curious to see what they are getting in him. I think the fact that Ohio State even considered playing him like as a potential starter or as a potential heavy contributor probably makes me think that he can still be a good player at Kansas State, but they definitely pivoted away from him. He did have a pick 6 early in the year. And Amos Talalele, he is a guy that, again, USC was considering playing a lot as a redshirt freshman this past year, but didn't. So I'll be interested to see how much of a big step forward he can take, because he hasn't played a lot of college football just yet, and they probably need him to take a big enough stride to be able to start on the interior. Is he ready to do that? He's still pretty young, very talented, but again, he couldn't crack the USC starting lineup, but it sounds like he came pretty close. So I'll give him that credit. Jaron Bradley and Jaden Rowe, like Gunnar Maldonado, guys that probably are injury risks a little bit, if we're being honest. Jaron Bradley never really had the injury problems at Texas Tech, though. So maybe the Boston College year was a fluke, and they'll hope for that. Jerron Tibbs is actually someone that I wasn't excited about as he was being recruited. But the more I get to know about what he is about, they absolutely loved him when he was on campus. And when you look at his career at Purdue, not a long one by any means, so he still has multiple years of eligibility remaining, I believe. But that's a guy that really took off as the year went on. His trajectory is going this way, so you have to like that.
I would just say Markevius Moss, I mean, he was the guy that really kind of got the momentum and ball rolling in this portal class, right? I mean, they'd only landed Tibbs at one point. I think it was on December 20th, 21st, when they secured the commitment from Moss about an hour after he was on Nebraska's campus on an official visit. And that was a big recruiting win. Markevius Moss was recruited by a lot of different programs, safety transfer from West Georgia, chose K-State over Nebraska, probably his final 2 list of schools. At one point, Markevius Moss was ranked as a top 10 safety in the portal, according to On3. Now, right now, as I look at it, he's ranked as the number 276 player overall in the portal and number 25 safety out of all the guys who entered, which, again, is probably like 2,000 kids. So being a top 300 guy in the portal rankings is pretty substantial. He's a big commit. Maldonado's a guy that started over 30 games in his career playing at the Power 4 level at both Northwestern and Arizona. DY outlined a lot of his numbers. He was a captain on both the 2023 and 24 teams at Arizona, so he's a leader. Was the Alamo Bowl MVP after an interception and a fumble return for a touchdown in that game. So I do think they've upgraded potentially at safety. You feel good about that. And then Talalele was a guy that at USC, he did get some snaps early in the year. And when you go back and watch the film, like, yeah, he's a little raw. He's a redshirt freshman. But, man, is he a mauler. Like, he is somebody that they don't really have up front because he's like 335 pounds, 6'4". Like, he is a road paver with the ground game. Will line up probably at guard for Kansas State, and somebody that's more unique because he's got more of that physicality, and he's going to be a bruiser on the inside of that Kansas State offensive line. So excited about him as well. I think he's a big recruiting win that Kansas State secured and somebody that they badly wanted. So, overall feeling pretty decent right now about the recruiting haul that they brought in, but certainly need to address a couple more spots, corner being one. Like to see them bring in a corner. Hopefully Amarian Fortenberry of South Alabama can be that guy that they close down. And then I'll feel decent about the cornerback room. Obviously, we'll talk about it again, another wide receiver. And then offensive tackle, I think, is where they probably really need to hit hard because we know that they probably would like, ideally, 2 offensive tackles. And the pickings are getting a little slim right now, and they haven't landed one.
And again, there will be a spring window, but it makes a world of difference if you can get somebody in for spring ball. So, lots to discuss. There are some high profile visitors that are on their way that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But I am excited for this home field apparel read because it gives me an opportunity to commend the Arizona State Sun Devils, since Derek is wearing his Forkum Devils shirt, which is pretty good. Man, hell of an effort. Arizona State did the Big 12 a world of good with its performance. But on 4th and 13, can we not bring a poorly disguised, like, zero blitz? Like, what? Come on, man. Just killing me. How could you call? You said you wouldn't be able to. What did you say in the Discord? Like, you wouldn't be able to sleep knowing that time your team lost a playoff. K-State lost a playoff game, having Texas down to 4th and 13.
Man, it was a really bad call, but boy, the coverage was actually still there. The two guys just had him run right by him. They had two guys for him. Still,
if that was K-State and the emotional ride to get back into that game and then have a 4th and 13, when your defense has played well for almost the entirety of the game, and you're sitting in a 4th and 13 and the pressure, the weight on the world is on Texas's shoulders, I don't know when I would get over that. Like, I would replay that in my mind a million times, because I can tell you, like, this was a regular season game last year at Texas. I replayed the Will Howard, like, missing the running lane in my head in the overtime period a million times and could not get over that. And that was a regular season game. Like, a college football playoff game against a powerhouse blue blood program like Texas with everything on the line, and you got a 4th and 13 yards to win the game. Man, that would haunt me as a fan forever, just like 1998 fumble does, that I won't get into details on. Yeah. So, that's the type of thing that just kills you. But that would haunt me more than the targeting call, honestly, even though that probably should have been targeting, as everybody is saying.
Yeah, the targeting call was BS, but it doesn't guarantee you the way that the 4th and 13 would have, especially with Arizona State's kicking game, but it was still BS.
Yeah. I would have gotten over if they would have lost and Bert Auburn makes that field goal for Texas, then that's going to be all over the news. But the fact that you were in a 4th and 13 to win
you got an even better opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, spin zone, there is. Remember, so TCU beat Michigan a couple of years ago, right? Nobody ever talks about that or remembers it because they're all like, "Oh, that was that TCU team that lost 65-7 or whatever in the national championship game to Georgia." The way Ohio State's playing right now, I feel like they might do that to Texas, let alone, what could have happened to Arizona State in that game. I don't know. Maybe it's better for the Big 12. You just leave with real close effort, Cam Scattaboo hero stuff, and you don't have to get waxed by Ohio State.
The last time Ohio State played Arizona State, they beat Jake Plummer in the Rose Bowl.
Which, that refreshed my mind, not to get us off topic, but when DY was talking about Gabe Powers, like, watching that Ohio State defense, it's not necessarily a bad thing you can't start for those guys, right? Yeah. I mean, those guys are loaded on the defensive side of the ball. So Gabe Powers, even if he's number 2 on the depth chart or even number 3, but got some snaps early in the year, is not a bad sign. That is a loaded defense with Jim Knowles as the D coordinator, who spoke highly of Powers heading into this season.
Cole, are you locked in for the Will Howard Texas revenge game?
Man, well, I'll be rooting for
Ohio State. Ohio State opened, I think, as a 2.5-point favorite. It's ballooned to 6 already.
Yeah. I don't know how that's Texas defense is going to be a pretty difficult challenge for Will.
Yes, but I will say, I don't know if, like, the Texas offense, Quinn Ewers is playing not great football right now. There's a lot of Texas fans that just want Arch Manning to play, and I can kind of understand it. Ohio State defense could keep them from scoring.
Remember when you guys gave me a hard time when I talked Ohio State up during the season and you guys were like, they don't have an offensive line? I get that. I don't get any, apologies for the walk that
I was just listening to Derek. I was just taking DY's my Ohio State expert, so I was just taking cues from him.
They've gotten better as they've gotten more injuries.
Arizona State, by the way, Cole, had 510 yards of offense on that Texas defense. All right. So, call them good all you want. Cam Scattaboo was no problem for him. I'm sure Cam Scattaboo's got plenty of home field apparel. Homefieldapparel.com is where you can, if you need an Arizona State shirt for that game, you can get it. If you want to get a Texas shirt and burn it or something, you can do that too. Whatever it is that you want at Home Field Apparel, they've got the best gear around for every team, including K-State, 50+ K-State designs that look great. So make sure you get to homefieldapparel.com and use promo code 3MA24 for 15% off your first order. That is promo code 3MA24 for 15% off your first order, and we're back in just a moment.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
So as far as visitors that are coming up here, we definitely know of a handful. And the one that is going to draw the most headlines is Malik Benson, a wide receiver, which will be our top storyline of the week, brought to you by our good friends at Alenco. Go to alencohome.com. That's ALENCO home.com to get hooked up with any home improvement need that you have. They can come essentially anywhere in we'll call it the 3 mile listening area, which I know is international, but you guys get the idea. Alencohome.com for any home improvement needs that you have. Malik Benson, former Kansas kid out of Lansing. He is a former member of the Alabama Crimson Tide. He played at Florida State this past year, which obviously was quite forgettable based on everything that happened there, and had to deal with DJU as his quarterback. He's an athlete, man. Obviously a former very highly recruited guy out of high school, K-State chased him once, chased him in the portal last year. Now they're chasing him again. He is visiting this week, but also set to visit Oregon and Tennessee, and maybe Texas A&M is still involved. So I don't know. Where are you at on this one, DY?
Technically, Kansas State is recruiting him. This would be a 4th time because they chased him as a high school.
Go in there too, right?
Yeah, as a high school prospect. They were really interested in him. He would have been to be honest, a top 300 talent at a high school, but he just wasn't. Everyone knew he wasn't probably going to qualify. So he goes the junior college route. He lights it up at Hutchinson Community College. He has the national championship when him and Will Lee went at it, when Will Lee was at Iowa Western. He's considered K-State pretty strongly, even towards the end there, just like when Will Lee did, and Will Lee picked K-State over Alabama. And Malik Benson was probably considering multiple schools there, but he also was considering Alabama, picked them, then obviously leaves Alabama, looks at K-State maybe for a moment, but obviously just sticks at, I guess, that high-profile school, the flashiness that he had been searching for, goes to Florida State. Similar results. He flashes the upside. His production's probably not completely what he wants, and the school and the team has a really poor year. Now with the JUCO rolling, he's like, okay, I'm going to keep playing college football, get back in the portal. Kansas State gets the first visit because Texas A&M is going to, be patient with him, I think. So that visit doesn't happen yet. Maybe it does later, as John alluded to. He's got visits scheduled for Tennessee and Oregon this weekend. I'm guessing that's kind of like a Saturday night through Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning-ish thing. I don't know how the exact dates are going to work out, but I think his intention is to go Kansas State, Tennessee, Oregon. And obviously he'd be at Oregon. I was going to say Oregon playoff practices, but they're out. Never mind. So I think it's those 3, unless A&M wants to come in and he continues to listen. I would say if I'm K-State, I got to close it before he gets to Tennessee and Oregon if I'm going to feel good about how this is going to go. And my pitch would be, you've already done this thing. You did Florida State and you did Alabama. It just seems like you're repeating the same thing if you go to Tennessee or Oregon. Come to K-State and kind of flourish in the way that you haven't at these other schools that you've been known to not really take off the way you want.
I think that's the hope, right? Local kid, come back home, play at the local school where there's relationships. There's relationships with this K-State staff because they've recruited him so many different times from Lansing, Kansas. Look, he played at Hutch JUCO. You guys mentioned it. He was the number 1 junior college player in the country in the 2022 class by far, had offers from the whole world, chose Alabama, minimal production in his first year at Bama, 13 receptions, 162 yards, then enters the portal again. Last year, I believe he visited Florida and Florida State, decided on the Seminoles. K-State was heavily involved in his recruitment last year out of the portal, goes to Florida State, has 25 receptions, 311 yards. Again, not a lot of production now. And his first 3 games last year, he had 12 receptions for 171 yards. In his last 9 games, he had around 140 yards. Florida State's passing attack was obviously a complete disaster. They led the country in sacks taken. They were 133rd out of 134 teams in pass efficiency offense, and the same with yards per play at 3.9. Only one team in the country was worse. That Florida State team was a debacle. I think it's telling in terms of Benson's profile that teams like Oregon and Tennessee are still after him, and Texas A&M potentially. The big name schools still see the potential with Malik Benson, despite the lack of production at the Power 4 level. And look, guys, he is the fit that this K-State offense really needs to round out this recruiting class. I say that because they've landed 2 big receivers, and Jaron Bradley at 6'5" and Tibbs at 6'3". Benson is more that 6 foot, 6'1", absolute explosive burner that you pair with Jace Brown, who can really stretch the field. He broke Olympian Maurice Green's state record in the 200 meters with a 21.38 second time in the 200 meter, has a standing long jump with a long jump of over 25 feet, 6'5" wingspan, long arms, 10.44 100-meter mark. And so that's also a tremendous number. Just a lot of speed, a guy that can really stretch the field and give this offense a different level of explosiveness in the passing game. And you just got to hope it clicks. If he chooses K-State, that they can figure it out. And I'm sure it helps K-State having a returning quarterback in Avery Johnson as a pitch as well. But yeah, I think I'm with DY. They gotta close this out while he's on the visit. You can't let him take the Oregon and the Tennessee visits.
I know Oregon just made the college football playoff. They had an undefeated regular season, won the Big Ten, and everything. But like their quarterback situation is still like I don't know if it's undetermined, unknown, maybe unproven is the right word. Dylan Gabriel's career is over at this point. Like the quarterback situation, maybe they just go with Dante Moore. But again, if it is Dante Moore, because they haven't taken a transfer, I don't believe, a quarterback, then you're talking about something unproven. Whereas Avery and Nico both have a season underneath them. So I would, if I'm Malik, if I'm even going to pay attention to one of those higher profile big name schools, wherever you want to call it, I don't know that I would look at Oregon this time around, maybe Tennessee. But again, I've already done that before, so I can get the best of both worlds. I can't State just seems like a more logical choice to me this time around.
I think Oregon is probably pitching. They're losing their top 3 receivers, I think, with Tez Johnson and Holden and those guys. But yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, if it's all about quarterback, I mean, then even if you throw Texas A&M into the mix, are they just going with Marcel Reed? Did they land a transfer quarterback?
I think it's Reed.
I think it's going to be Reed.
So, I mean, like I guess he's fine, but I think Avery stacks up pretty comparably to Nico and Marcel Reed in terms of what they did this year. So, yeah, I mean, look, you guys know me. I mean, I'm tantalized by the athletic ability, recruiting profile, everything on Benson, even while recognizing that there's going to be some risk there because he just hasn't been that productive. But I think you've got enough elsewhere in the receiving room that, like, hey, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But it's this type of lottery ticket that I think you would love to have. Cole mentioned earlier that corner, another definite area of need. They've got a Marion Fortenberry from South Alabama scheduled to visit
today.
Okay, all right, on campus. How big of a get would this be, DY, and what's the competition like there?
And I say today, so in case you're not listening today is Thursday, January 2nd. Marion Fortenberry, South Alabama cornerback. I think this is a guy that they really, really want. I can't pretend to have watched a lot of South Alabama cornerback play, so I'm not going to really provide an evaluation.
Well, Cole just gave us Malik Benson's like high school long jump numbers, DY. So you need to step your game up a little bit.
Yeah, and I imagine this guy probably wasn't highly thought of or had tremendous stuff in high school the way Malik Benson did, or he wouldn't have ended up at South Alabama. I'm sure he's a development project that really took off at South Alabama because of the way they coached him up and kind of turned him into, even though it's only after one season. So maybe he was someone that just got lost in the shuffle, but I think he's a pretty big want and a pretty big need, and someone that if they were able to close on, I think that they would be pretty jazzed up by his addition. What I will say is, like, some of the other schools you hear connected to him might not be like an Ohio State or an Oregon or a Texas, but it's that maybe next tier along with Kansas State of teams that typically have really good defenses. He's already visited Houston. You know what Willie Fritz has done in his career as and I don't know if he's even a defensive coach. I'm not sure that he is. Maybe he is. But obviously really good defenses. Utah, really good defenses. They're mentioned with him now. So, everyone's going to be caught up in Malik Benson, and rightfully so. But Fortenberry would be a tremendous addition. And like Cole said, offensive tackle is probably a bigger need than both of those at this point.
When I watch the Fortenberry highlights, DY, tremendous tackler at corner. And I think about then the physicality that Kansas State would have at corner if they landed Fortenberry. And you think about Donovan McIntosh and what we saw from Zayshawn Rich. Bigger, more physical corners, guys that can tackle on the edge. Now, that's not the number one thing you look for in a corner, but also a guy that was a true freshman at South Alabama this last year. That's what's so enticing to me, guys, is that he started 7 games as a true freshman, has 3 years of eligibility remaining. 45 tackles, 7 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. On3 has him listed as the number 175 overall player in the entire portal to have entered in a top 25 corner. Now, he told 247 Sports, I think maybe a week or so ago, that he'd heard from KU, Louisville, Houston, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, you name it. A lot of different programs there that he's been mentioned with. He's only visited Houston. K-State gets the second visit. Hopefully they can lock this down because he's a guy that they really like and have had their eye on. I think there's a lot of potential there. He's 5'11", 6 feet tall. He actually listed an offer from Ole Miss out of high school, but I don't know if that was a take necessarily. But it's not like he was a completely under the radar type guy. Like he was ranked in the On3 industry consensus like 1300th player in the country out of high school, a 3-star recruit. So he had a little bit of a profile to him. He's from Mississippi originally. Hopefully Kansas State can secure Fortenberry because he's a guy they like. And I'd feel pretty good about the cornerback room if they have Rich, him, McIntosh, and maybe even Kenigel Thomas, DY, who I don't believe entered, right?
No, he never entered. So that's probably, and we'll see what happens in the spring, but that's probably one of them big surprises because he basically opted to redshirt. I don't know, because he was dealing with some injury things. I don't know that Kansas State really was like, you're redshirting. I think he had preferred to do it. But then he played in the bowl game. Not a bunch, just a couple snaps here and there. But it was that safety, so that's interesting to me, is he played safety in the bowl game. Maybe it was out of necessity.
Yeah,
that could definitely be the case because they were pretty undermanned at safety. I mean, Colby McAllister was already not playing because of off-season surgery, so that could have definitely been it. But pair another corner like a Fortenberry with the upside of Jaden Rowe, and then you got your 3 young guys that you're still trying to develop there, Kenigel Thomas, Donovan McIntosh, and Zayshawn Rich. And all of a sudden you probably, I don't know if you have anyone as good as Jacob Parrish was this past year, but you have plenty more depth than you have this year, and you're probably, I'm trying to put this a kind way, and probably not even is underselling it. You're better at least 2 through 5. Because quite frankly, Keenan Garber, I think, really took a dip in terms of his production and performance this past season.
Well, as Cole mentioned, tackle, one of the big areas of need. I know there are a couple names on the board there. I will let you guys take it the rest of the way, but DY, fill everybody in.
Yeah, cool. Correct me here if I'm wrong, but Brandon Snee, the offensive tackle, Wagner, someone that is confirmed as visiting. What's his? Do you have his visit schedule? I know you said it's plenty of schools. I didn't have the dates or anything.
Yeah, I do. So Brandon Snee, left tackle from Wagner, he's visiting Colorado first, January 3rd to the 5th. Now, one thing of note, DY, with Colorado is Phil Loholt, the offensive line coach for Colorado, just left for, I think, Mississippi State.
Yeah.
So
what I would say too is they close well, so I would worry about that first visit being Colorado.
I do as well. I do think it helps though that they haven't been able to name a different O-line coach yet because that just happened. All right, so he visits Colorado first, January 3rd to the 5th. Then he visits Illinois, which is probably enticing, sexy sell. They produce good O-linemen under Bielema. And
yes, Bielema's an O-line guy. Yep.
Yeah. So January 6th to the 7th, he visits them. K-State's third on the visit docket, January 8th to the 9th. He visits Houston January 10th to the 11th, and then Cal January 12th to the 13th. He has a busy schedule. No days off. It looks like over the.
He's originally where he's originally from.
That's a good question. I can check that, or you want to check that, and I'll get the background on him real quick. So he is the number 313th player overall in the portal, number 21 offensive tackle per On3. Big dude, 6'7". 320 pounds. He also had visited Marshall in East Carolina. He started to blow up in the portal. 2 years of eligibility remaining. 84-inch wingspan and an 81 PFF pass grade this last year, along with 72.4 run grade. He did not allow a sack this season. was really good. Now, how does he translate to the Power 4 level? Wagner, I believe, is Division 2 or whatever level it is. It's certainly a significant step up, but a guy that they seem to really like, and a lot of other Power 4 programs are after pretty hot and heavy too. DY, do you know where he is from? This Wagner's up in the Northeast, right?
Wagner's, I'm guessing he's from the Northeast. I think he's a native of Philadelphia. He went to Fork Union Military Academy as well. But Fork Union's one of those places where you can be from just about anywhere, and then you go there. It's basically almost like not a trade school, but a boarding school of some kind. So, but I do think he's from Philadelphia.
Yeah, he lists his hometown on his Wagner profile. Hometown's listed as Philly, and what's interesting about that is there's nobody from that geography that's on his visit list, which can be a good thing, or maybe he just wants to get away.
What's interesting is, like, in trying to find that, I just found that, like, in the last 48 hours, he's been contacted by both Iowa State and Florida as well.
Well, hopefully this isn't one of those situations where K-State gets jumped in the visit list by a Florida or an SEC type program.
Probably not, but I could see someone like Cal, because that's a long way from home, getting jumped for like Florida or Iowa State.
Yeah. Well, K-State's already beaten Cal for an offensive line recruit until Alele as well for the USC transfer. So Snee, a guy that they would really like, and then Mikulski, I'll let you weigh in on him, the offensive tackle transfer from Ohio State, who actually appears to still be with the Buckeyes. So I don't know how that's going to work out in terms of taking visits as Ohio State keeps winning.
But we were told that he could even make his decision before the dead period ended. Obviously, that didn't happen. So I think we're in a situation where, since he has elected to stay with Ohio State throughout this process and provide, I guess, additional depth along the offensive line, and Ohio State is totally okay with that, apparently. And I have no problem with that. I think those situations are actually good for football, rather than just abandoning your team in a time of need and playing the college football. I mean, he wants to win a national championship too. So get your ring if you can. I have no problem with it. But that makes me think that there is a tremendous chance that he will make his college decision without taking any visits. And I'm still under the impression that it's Kansas State or Indiana. Indiana, you got to remember, is basically the hometown school here. This kid's from Indianapolis. But what I will say is K-State has had tremendous success in Indianapolis under Chris Kleiman. Yep. I'd like to know what his contact is there, because he shoots and scores in Indianapolis quite a bit. So Kleiman's kind of got a weapon there for him to kind of produce that kind of production and success. And you kind of alerted me to this, that Indiana, happened to be targeting other offensive tackles as well, bringing them in on visits. I think they have one coming in on a visit today. But so is K-State's also targeting other tackles too. So is it a backup plan? Is it you're taking two? Is it that you're not getting him? I don't know. But you got to remember, Indiana could be taking more than one as well.
Yeah, there's James Madison, left tackle. Tyshawn Wyatt is visiting today.
Obviously, probably played for Cignetti, right?
Yeah. So there's familiarity there. Preseason All-Sun Belt second team this last year. Familiarity was with Cignetti, visiting January 2nd at Indiana. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, look, we know K-State would ideally like two offensive tackles too. So like Indiana could be in the same boat
or setting up a backup play. But I would imagine they're bringing in a guy that Cignetti's already coached. That guy is probably committing to Indiana.
Yeah. And this kid's a left tackle from James Madison. And, I know some people that think Mikulski would be better suited to be a right tackle in an ideal world. So we'll see. He started a couple games this year. Mikulski did, right, against Nebraska and Oregon. Now, he struggled in those games. Now, those weren't easy teams to play against. But,
no.
6'6", ideal tackle size, was in the 2021 recruiting class.
Your first few starts, you're going to struggle to I know Ohio State would rather him stay in Columbus, so that just tells me that they think he's going to be pretty good or is pretty good. Obviously struggled in those games. We'll see what happens. Like, if they didn't like the kid or if they thought he sucked, they would have told him to kick rocks when he entered the portal, right?
Yeah.
And he's with the program still.
And then as we look ahead to need, so we already talked about it. They'd ideally like two offensive tackles. We talked about Malik Benson. They want one more receiver. We talked about Fortenberry. They want one more corner. And then really it's the only other piece, right, that they really, really are honed in on is getting a depth piece at running back, right? A more physical, kind of bruising style running back with some durability to just help take a little bit of the burden off Joe Jackson and Dylan Edwards.
Yeah, you think. Haven't heard a lot of traction on that front. I imagine maybe they find someone that could be a spring thing. It could be a thing where it's just hard. Running backs are you'll probably find one. I will say it's just like you might not be getting the kind of guy you thought you were going to get just because of the way Joe Jackson and Dylan Edwards popped off in the bowl game. So that probably because they were bringing in guys like the Louisville running back, Juwan Brown, the Arkansas running back, Braylon Russell, the USC running back, Quentin Joyner, was scheduled to visit Kansas State before he committed to Texas Tech. So we'll see where they can go at running back because I'd be interested. An under-reported story that's kind of bizarre and wild that I'm surprised hasn't got as much traction, but maybe people just chalk it up to college football is college football at this point, is Braylon Russell was literally taking visits to like 3 or 4 different schools during Arkansas's bowl prep, one of them being Kansas State. He was in Manhattan for 48 hours, and he still played for the Razorbacks in their bowl game, despite when his teammates were practicing and getting ready for that game. He was visiting other schools because he was in a portal. He eventually rescinds and withdraws from the portal a second time, and then still plays in a bowl game. I mean, maybe people don't care anymore. Maybe people are desensitized to what that was or means. But also, if I'm a guy at an Arkansas team and I was at every practice busting my ass, that would have kind of pissed me off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. You pointed it out to Curry, John, and I during the bowl game when we were watching it, and Russell was getting a lot of carries. He was their starting back in that game, and was the one that closed it out and killed the clock for Arkansas. Yeah, but bizarre world of college football nowadays when we see things like that. Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the running back. Like they may have to wait till the spring window at this point, or maybe it's an FCS running back that enters the portal or somebody willing to, a lot of the guys they were targeting were younger guys like Russell, like Juwan Brown, like Joyner, all guys with 3 years or so left of eligibility, probably selling that like, yeah, you might not get as many snaps this next year, but eventually you'll get some. I don't know. It's hard to sell because Dylan Edwards is still relatively young, 2 years left, and Joe Jackson has 3 years left. And so it's a hard pitch. Have you heard any buzz on Davon Rice or JB Price at running back?
I mean, Davon Rice got in on special teams and stuff. So I think he's on now he's a lot more like Dylan Edwards than not. So you're not going to get a lot of, and JB Price didn't really get in. So,
yeah. Are you surprised, DY, that we haven't heard more? Like, they got to get down to 105 players. Do you think a lot of the guys just aren't publicly known that are going?
Well, I think there's probably 10 walk-ons that
just don't announce.
Well, they're not going to enter the portal. They're probably just going to be done playing football.
Yeah.
Like, you got to understand that these guys, some of these walk-ons weren't even preferred walk-ons. Some of them haven't played or won't play. Like, you see it all the time. There's a reason why, Kansas State carried almost 130 players. Or we'll say 130. So there was 45 walk-ons. 30 to 35 of them were probably preferred at one point. 25 to 30 of those 45 were probably freshmen and sophomores. Because by the time those guys get to seniors, like a lot of those guys are already done playing football. There's not a lot of walk-ons actually make it freshman to senior year.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so, and I only asked that question because I've seen some people asking, well, how are they going to get down to 105 and seeing.
Well, I'd imagine they're closer to 105 right now than we think, just because there's probably a chunk of walk-ons that have already recognized that they're not coming back.
I would agree. Okay, so we just talked about they probably ideally would like 5 more players from the portal, and then maybe if somebody jumps in the next few days, regardless of position, maybe a best player available, a BPA, right? Where it's just somebody that you're like, well, we got to take this guy or take a run at him. He's not necessarily a need, but a guy that we would love to add. So we'll see if that happens. In case it'll be monitoring the portal for something like that. One thing I wanted to circle back real quick on DY, because we only briefly touched on him, but the addition of Jaron Bradley, 6'5", 220-pound receiver, transfer before Texas Tech or after Texas Tech went to Boston College. He had 51 receptions for 744 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2022 at Tech. In 2023, he had 36 receptions, 431 yards. And then K-State recruited him some last year in the portal. He chose Boston College, only had 94 yards and 6 receptions. And all of that came early on in the season. Boston College's passing game was a little bit of a mess as well. But this is a guy Matt Wells was his head coach for in 2021, recruited him to Texas Tech. He was preseason first team All Big 12 heading into the 2023 season after his outstanding freshman year at Tech. He's a big physical kid. People are going to look at those numbers at Boston College last year and kind of the downward trend over the last couple of seasons, DY. But to me, Matt Wells' familiarity with him and that he wanted him, and Oklahoma got him in for a visit too, right? Oklahoma was seeking out Jaron Bradley. Makes me feel a little bit better about this. What do you make of the addition of Jaron Bradley?
Yeah, it tells me that they wanted size by going after and taking both him and Tibbs. It also tells me that they understood that in wanting to improve the wide receiver room, they would have to take some gambles of guys that had the ability to be productive, but for one reason or another hadn't been and or, struggled, and there was a reason why maybe their stock had dipped a little bit. And although had already shown. So Jaron Bradley makes sense. Jerron Tibbs makes sense because he hasn't completely exploded, but it looked like he was on the verge of doing so by the end of the season at Purdue. And then Malik Benson, again, a guy that can explode, but hasn't necessarily done it at both Alabama and Florida State. So it's like that top rung, they took a swing, right? With Neziah Hunter, got in the top 2, lost to Nebraska, never got him on campus. But it's that second tier of finding guys that, can explode or have exploded, but for one reason or another, their stock has dipped just a little bit. And you're going to try to take that gamble or that lottery ticket and return them to the production that they once had, or get them to the production that they are totally capable of, that being like guys like Tibbs and maybe Malik Benson. But for Jaron Bradley, if you want to look at it as best case scenario, you do squint and look at those 2022 numbers, and you do squint and look at 2023 preseason All Big 12 first team, and you say Boston College was an anomaly, and Matt Wells reuniting with him will kind of reignite maybe that ability and production that you once saw when he was in Lubbock.
Yeah. Of course, we said the same thing with Dante Cephas, right? And Matthew Middleton's familiarity with them.
Yeah, but just because it didn't work one time doesn't mean it never will, right?
No.
So you got to continue to take those kinds of swings, and hope sometimes it works.
Well, and the difference you've seen was between Cephas and Bradley is Bradley's done it at the Power 4 level before. I mean,
he was at the Big 12.
Yeah. So, and see, look, I don't mean to drag Dante Cephas. He made some nice plays down the stretch of the year. Like, he came on a little bit, and I had the drop on the 2-point conversion in the bowl game, but the big 35-yard conversion on the 4th and 3. Yeah. So, anyways, anything else, DY, to add before we wrap? Did we miss on anybody? Anybody else you want to mention?
Well, we didn't mention Ralph Ortiz, but if I had to, we mentioned him lightly and briefly, just like Jaron Bradley. But if I had to muster a guess, he's your next commitment, probably already in the fold, just hasn't announced, going to be a linebacker or D2 kid, just like Marcavius Moss. Well, actually, Marcavius Moss, West Georgia used to be D2. They're FCS now. But Ralph Ortiz from West Florida, a little bit lighter. But I was told guy was built like a brick house when they got him on campus. They're actually pretty excited about him. They think they can actually put on even a bit more weight on him. So he's not necessarily even locked in at Sam linebacker. They think he can maybe play well.
I think he was the freshman of the year in his league. I think he's got a couple years left at this point in his career. Division II transfer. The one thing that's a selling point on him when you do watch him and find the highlights, speed. Pops, he's got some explosion, some burst to him coming off the edge. I think he runs a 4.6 40. So hopefully he can translate and be a guy that can be a number 2 type at linebacker heading into next year. And then hopefully some of your guys that redshirted at linebacker, a Boone Morris or a Jake Stonebreaker, can be a guy that maybe a depth.
The way that it's been explained to me is Ortiz can probably play Will, Sam, maybe a little bit of both, and provide depth at both of those spots, which would be nice. You got Powers there at Will and Purnell at Sam, so maybe you got what you need. And then Asa can play Sam if he comes back and is healthy enough to do so. His injury was early enough to where he probably could be ready sooner, but you do have to wonder what those injuries have done to his athleticism moving forward. I will say I saw him about a week ago. Asa Newsom still looks incredible physically. Like, he still looks the part. He is so jacked. He looks like the part of a NFL linebacker. But you just hope that the athleticism remained. And then middle linebacker again, probably more questions there. Still, I would say, but you do have an all Big 12 caliber, though, in Austin Romaine as the starter. You wonder about the depth, but again, Romaine is probably going to be able to take a larger share of snaps. So you do like that. And I do think there's a possibility. Boone Morris will be a sophomore. I think he is a Mike linebacker. I think they've had Jake Stonebreaker at other spots, at other linebacker spots. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to mix him in a little bit at the Mike now too. A guy that they really like. He played more and more as the season went on. Played some actual linebacker snaps in the bowl game as well. Played a lot of special teams. Did not redshirt, or maybe he did redshirt, but I'd have to go back. I think he did redshirt, right?
Yeah, they redshirted both those guys. I didn't know that he played anything but special teams.
Yeah, I was on the phone with someone not too long ago. I said we got him in on some linebacker snap.
So rewatch.
Yeah, so Stonebreaker, guy they like. It'll be interesting. I think they might try to mix him in and Mike a little bit going forward. So I will say, like, we don't know what they have at the back of Mike. Bo Palmer's coming back. You think mostly they would rather him just play some special teams next season, but that true freshman class now will be redshirt freshmen. They really like both Boone Morris and Jake Stonebreaker.
Did we ever hear on Asa? Was it for sure an ACL again? Did we ever get details on that?
I think it was.
Okay.
I don't know if same knee, whatever. It might have been same knee, but I just think he'll be back. We'll just see what it does to him.
I was just hoping, part of me was hoping it was like maybe a torn meniscus or something, or MCL and not an ACL, and would lead to a little quicker recovery on the timeline. But never fully heard, but knew it was season ending when it obviously occurred, as Chris Lyman announced it a couple days after. Okay. And then, look, this time sensitive wise, we do not expect JJ Dunnigan, the top player in the state, to pick Kansas State, right? Like, we have a general idea where he's going, DY? Well, yeah, where he's committing, you should say.
Well, by the time that people listen to this, because I think he announces this afternoon that it'll probably be done, but I expect it to be Kansas.
Yeah, we'll see. I think you've said this for months that does not lock this thing in by any means. He even said he's going to still take visits.
Yeah, everyone knew that the whole time. I don't really understand the January choice unless you're just trying to set the bar of what teams have to try to get to in terms of a financial commitment. But a January commitment here means nothing, at least to me. I don't think it means nothing to his recruitment either, but we'll see. I kind of said jokingly in like a smart-ass way, but it's probably true that the school that he commits to first will not be the school he signs with. So I don't think, for instance, I don't think Nebraska and K-State are going to worry about a KU commitment in January.
Yeah, I know you've said that for several weeks now, that regardless of where he chooses, he's probably not going to be the school that he ultimately ends up at. So, look, we'll see. Maybe KU hangs on to him. That's going to be a up and down recruitment. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. Verbal commitments, as we know, doesn't mean a lot. We had to go through the roller coaster of Lincoln Cure with Oregon up until the final deadline after he committed to Kansas State, and he stuck ultimately. So we'll see what JJ Dunnigan does. I know a guy that you really love.
He's really, really good. Yeah.
All righty. Well, that'll put a bow on this show. Wanted to get a portal update pod out here for you. For I can't remember when we plugged it for sure, but make sure you go and support Alenco. If you need any home improvement projects, go to alencohome.com. That's ALENCO home.com. They cover Western Missouri, Northeastern Kansas. John mentioned the 3 mile listening area, so hit them up. Kohler Luckstone shower systems for bathroom remodels. They do it all. Siding on your home, doors, etc. Anything you need. New window replacements. They specialize in premium window replacements. So go to alencohome.com. Again, that's ALENCO home.com. and support them. Family owned and operated by tremendous K-Staters, been around since 1986, and they're based out of Kansas City. Also, hit up Homefield Apparel, homefieldapparel.com. Discount code 3MAW24 scores you 15% off of your entire order. And as always, Holiday Distillery, go get stocked up with some Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon. For DY and John, who previously signed off, and Nick Springer behind the scenes producing the show, I'm Cole Manbeck signing off on another episode of 3MAW.